Getting ready. Good evening, everyone. We'll just start in 1 second. We had a little technical glitch, but I think we're through with that, and I'm hoping everyone can join okay. Let me introduce myself. Good evening. I'm Patricia Sibilia, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Albany County, and I'll be your moderator tonight. The League is a nonpartisan organization, and we're all about your education and involvement in local government. So I thank you for taking the time to participate in tonight's program. We hope that you will find it both informative and useful. We hope you got the quick quiz we sent out today, and if you haven't already taken it, feel free to do it as an open book quiz afterward while exploring your local municipality's website. That would be helpful. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. And do it as a slideshow. I have to get the Zoom credentials out of the way. And thanks from the beginning. Okay. We ask that you stay muted during the program. At the end, we'll do Q&A, and when we do that, we may ask you to unmute. And because we've allowed a fair amount of time at the end of our program for question and answer, we want this to be engaging and informative to you. So you can start to put questions that you have into the chat. I'll be monitoring them, and when we get to the end, we will then start to take those questions. So this program is being recorded. You should have gotten the message about that, and it will be available on the Albany League's YouTube channel. An email will go out probably in the next day or so. It will include the link to the recording, and it will also include a very brief survey. It's only 5 questions, including you being able to indicate if there are topics that you'd like to learn about in the future. I originally, when I started working on this, I visioned it as a series, and we're starting with just the local municipal government, main stuff, but we'll see what you guys all want to see. Also, a copy of the slides, it can be available to you if you reply to that follow-up email and request them. Making sure we admit people as we go here. Now, I'd like to introduce our speakers for tonight. Besides myself, we have Patricia Strach. She's a professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration and Policy. Her current research examines the opioid epidemic in local communities, and her most recent book, which sounded very interesting to me, is The Politics of Trash: How City Officials Used Corruption to Clean Cities in 1890 to 1929. Very interesting time in our lives. Which was published by Cornell in 2023. It shows how local governments solve pressing public problems. She was a Robert Wood Johnson Scholar in Health Policy Research at Harvard between 2008 and 2010, after receiving her doctorate in political science from the University of Wisconsin at Madison in 2004. Also speaking tonight is Paul Wolf. He is an attorney with 32 years of experience and a partner at the law firm of Berzer and Wolf. And before entering private practice, Paul held several governmental positions, including Chief of Staff to the Buffalo Common Council, General Counsel for the Buffalo Housing Authority, and an attorney with the Erie County Department of Social Services. Paul is also the founder and president emeritus of the New York Coalition for Open Government. And now let's review our program for tonight. We're going to look at the agenda, and I will kick off myself with covering why we are having this presentation tonight. Then Professor Strach will cover all the basics of local government, followed by Paul Wolf talking about 4 essential resources, which are the municipal charter or code, comprehensive plans, open meeting laws, and freedom of information law. Then he'll conclude with how you can take action before we head into covering your questions. Okay, here we go. Why are we having this presentation? In looking, let me start by saying that I have experienced firsthand in my work with the league that you can make an impact at the local level. This is in sharp contrast to the frustration we may feel in what may be happening at the federal or state level, where we sometimes feel like we're just a pawn in the game. Particularly now, there is a lot of things in the news that might evoke really strong feelings. But the local level is where where our voice most directly and most easily heard. It's truly where you have the most influence. It begins with the fact that your vote carries much more weight when you consider the number of registered voters for local elected positions and how many of them actually vote, which is what the real shame is. I've seen a number of local elections come down to just a handful of votes in deciding who will represent us. And the people you're voting for are your neighbors. You can reach out to them much more easily, learn where they stand on things, and hopefully have a real conversation. If you start talking to them, you'll most likely find a lot of them care about their community and are really trying to do what they think is right for it. Whereas at the higher levels, representatives tend to be much more deeply party ingrained. You've heard the saying, all politics is local. While there may be several interpretations of this, Tip O'Neill often referred to the fact that politicians often appeal to their constituents on local issues. Politicians are truly motivated to reach voters from the bottom up by addressing local concerns. In general, representatives often respond more to the issues that their constituents raise to them, and in local communities, the ability to do this is much greater. It will make a voter happy and oil that squeaky wheel that keeps calling their house with concerns. Locally, you tend to have a more vested interest in what happens in your community. It could impact your home value if you're a homeowner, and it can determine your local services such as park, trash, road maintenance, and so forth. If you attend a municipal meeting, you are likely to see neighbors who also are trying to protect and build their community, and your voices together can carry more weight and become a stronger influence. For instance, in 2018, the League was part of a coalition that pushed to have Albany County pass a law banning styrofoam in all restaurants with significant food service operations. Although we eventually had to deal with the dark corporations, which caused the legislature actually to change the rules on public comment by putting local residents first, there is often much less influence of lobbyists or large corporations at the local level than you would see at the state and particularly at the federal level. And often, change at the state level can happen more easily if there are local laws that are placed. If there are local laws that are in place to address the issue. The change can come from the bottom up, as a lot of the legislative work has already been done. The styrofoam ban change at the county level actually helped New York State implement its single-use polystyrene ban several years later in 2022. I know of many other examples of where local action resulted in big game, but there isn't enough time to cover them all. Instead, I will stop sharing and turn the presentation now over to Professor Strach.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I teach state and local government at the University at Albany, so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart and to my students' hearts as well. And I want to start off by kind of giving you some context, some broader context, and Paul's going to dive into more specifics. And I'm going to start by talking about what are municipal governments. And to give you some context, I want to get a sense of how many governments we're really talking about. And I always ask my students to guess how many local governments we have in the United States. The answer to how many local governments is more than 90,000. And I never get that answer because I don't think most people understand how many different kinds of governments we have in the United States. And to start off with, we can think about really when we think about local government, they're broken down into two different types. On the one hand, we have special purpose governments, And those are governments that do one or very limited number of functions. So that might be anything like a fire district or a school district. So they cover kind of a narrow area, but there are so many special purpose governments. That's what accounts for the bulk of that 90,000 number. And then we also have general purpose governments. And you can see that figure that is on the screen. That is the black part of the bars. Those are general purpose governments. That's remained pretty steady over time. And general purpose governments are the kinds of governments we think of when we think of local government. So that'll be a county or a city or a town or a village. And general purpose governments, just like the name suggests, do many different things. So they'll take care of, taxation, they'll provide more services. They take care of the kinds of things that local governments are a part of. And so when we think about municipal governments, we know that they're one type of government, and that type of government is a general purpose government that consists of cities, towns, and villages. So municipal governments are sub-county governments, and the number of municipalities varies by state. And so this figure that you can see, but you can't read because it's small on your screen, it's just meant to show you the variation in the number of municipal governments in the United States. So on the left of your screen, those orange bars show you how many municipal governments there are by state. And you can see some states like Illinois have a lot, Texas has a lot of municipal governments, and some like Maine have very few municipal governments. And on the right, that shows you towns, and we separated towns out just so that you can get a sense, because in a way, when you're thinking about municipalities, which remember are cities, towns, and villages, you're comparing apples and oranges because not every state has towns. And so on the right, you can see we in the Northeast and folks in the Midwest have towns, but largely in the South and the West, they do not. So the takeaway of this is there are a lot of local governments in the United States. There are a lot of municipal governments in the United States, which means there's a lot of ways for all of us to get involved in our local government. But how many that is really varies depending on the state. So how many are we talking about in New York State? So in New York State, we have 62 counties, we have 61 cities, and you can see the bulk of local governments in New York State are towns and villages. We have over 900 towns and over 500 villages. And each of these different governments are organized slightly differently. So it's not like every county has the same kind of form of government or every city has the same form of government. So I'm going to review quickly, kind of just to give you a sense of what these different governments look like. So when we think about county government, they're structured in three main ways. And the traditional county government is a county commission, and that is elected county commissioners, and it separately has elected county officials. And so in this kind of government, no one person is responsible for the administration, the way a governor might be responsible for the administration of a state. 1/3 of counties are still structured in this way. The second kind of form is a county administrator or manager. And counties started to shift from this kind of having a legislature that was in charge of everything to having a more professional manager because they needed a more professional form of government, right? It's hard when you're relying on a kind of a legislature to get everything done. And then the third form is kind of an elected county executive or kind of a county mayor structure. And that is where voters elect both the county commission, the legislature, and they separately elect a county executive. And so this is probably the most familiar to most people, this kind of county executive, county mayor structure, because it looks like what we think of when we think of like a state government or a federal government, for example. These kinds of county governments are usually found in urban counties, and about 13% of counties across the country operate in this way today. So if we think about city governments, they kind of follow the same kinds of categories. There's different forms of city governments that work along a lot along the same lines. There's the same kind of commission structure in which the commissioners are elected by a legislature, by voters, and they administer the individual departments in a city government. So they're the policy-making body. And in some cases, one of the commissioners assumes the kind of ceremonial duties of like a mayor. This plan sometimes includes a professional manager. The second kind of government is the council manager, in which there's an appointed or professional manager who's the administrative head of the city. And again, just like when I was talking about the county, when you have a legislature that's running the government, you're lacking someone who's kind of running things on a day-to-day basis. And so the council manager is kind of meant to address that idea that somebody has to be responsible for oversight of management of the city. And then there's the mayor council, which comes in two flavors, a weak mayor or a strong mayor council. And the strong mayor council is the most common form of city government in New York State. And that's when you have an elected mayor who's the chief executive and the administrative head of the city. And the council is the policy-making body. So again, just like when I talked about the counties, this is the one that probably seems most familiar to us, because the strong mayor council form of government looks a lot like a governor and the legislature, or looks a lot like a president in Congress, right? It's the idea that you have one person who's the head of the government and who has oversees the executive branch. All right, when we think about, there's also kind of a town boards. So some of you live in towns, you may have a sense of the boards. These are a little bit different. Towns are run by boards, and in a town, the supervisor is the chief executive of that board. And that makes it seem like the supervisor is a very important and powerful person, and that could be the case personally, but it actually means that the supervisor has really no more authority than any other member of the town board, but they have more responsibility than the other members. So the supervisor, for example, presides over town board meetings. Towns don't provide as many services as cities, and they rely on special districts often to provide services such as fire. And we talked a little bit about what that was, these kind of special purpose governments at the beginning. Now I want to give you a sense of like how many of these municipalities are we talking about? What do they look like? What is the difference between a city and a town? And again, like most things when we talk about the United States, it varies depending on the state that we're talking about. So each state decides what constitutes a city and what constitutes a town. They make their own rules. Historically, towns and cities were distinguished by their size, but these designations were put in place oftentimes more than a century ago, and they've stayed that way even when population changes. New York State does not make the distinction based on size, and you can see here, right? So you want to say that towns are small and cities are big, but you can look, except for New York City, which is the largest city in the United States, there's a lot of very large towns, and you can see some much smaller cities. And cities are municipal corporations. They have charters from the state, which Paul's going to talk about, that sets out their boundaries, the governmental powers they have, the structure and organization, the methods of finance. And a charter really is like a license which grants authority, self-governing authority to a community. Now, the next question is, why does this matter? Why do municipal governments matter? Why are we learning all of this information? I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why municipal governments are so important. This is a slide that you've already seen. And the first reason that municipal governments are so important is that they are the most common form of general purpose government. So those black bars, municipal governments are the most common kind. And if you look at the United States, there's more than 36,000 municipal governments in the United States. Right? So there's more than 36,000 ways for us to get involved in our local government, in our municipal government here. right? So the first reason that we care about municipal governments is just that there's so many of them. That this is a big part of the way that government works. And I know that when we think about government, like always, not even recently, but when we think about government, we're always thinking about the national government in Washington, D.C. Sometimes we think about the government in Albany, the state government. But really, when we think about who's doing the work of governing, this is happening at the municipal level. And then along that same thing, the second reason we should care about municipal governments is that they do a lot. So on the left, this is the city of Albany. I just pulled this from the website. And on the right, this is New York City. And it's just to give you a sense of the range of things that these governments do. And so these are the departments that Albany has on the left and the department that New York City has on the right. And the fact that we can't even get through the letter C for New York City in that teeny tiny type just tells you how much New York City government is doing. So what is it that municipal governments are doing when we think about this level of government? What do? Municipal governments provide for common functions of local government, like police, like fire, like streets, like sewage, sanitation, and parks, right? So they're providing a lot of things that we care very deeply about. So again, a lot of focus on the national level, but when we think about the things that really have an effect on our day-to-day lives, a lot of those services are provided by municipal governments. More than half of large cities also provide welfare services and public education. And so you can just see that what municipal local governments are doing a lot of work that we care very deeply about. And so all you have to do is to go on your local municipal government's webpage, like where I pulled these from, and look at the different departments, and you can get a real sense of what these governments are doing. The third reason that we should care about municipal governments is that they shape perceptions of government. And so one of the things that I like to think about is like, how do we shape our views of government? And, professional political scientists like me have all kinds of ideas about how that works. But at the end of the day, nobody goes home and opens an Excel spreadsheet and lists all the things they know about government and all their feelings about government. That's just not the way it works. So how people come to view government as a good thing or not a good thing is in large part shaped by their experience of government, right? So have the police pulled you over and treated you poorly? Have the police pulled you over and treated you well? Did you go to school and feel like you were treated well and valued? Or did you go to school and the ceiling is leaking and your teachers are turning over every 3 months? So how people think about government is really determined by their individual experience of government, like what their interactions with the police, their interactions with social services provided by their municipality, their interactions with schools provided by local government. And it's shaped by watching how other people that they care about are treated. So that might be other community members, that might be family members. And so the third reason that we should care about municipal governments is that they shape how we think about government generally. Not just, I'm going to say that my local government treated me poorly and therefore I still like the federal government. People think about government and they don't make those distinctions. I was treated poorly by government, by the police, and therefore government is a bad thing. So they shape kind of our perspective as a whole. And since most of us don't have very many interactions with the federal government, it's oftentimes these local municipal governments that are shaping how we think about government. And finally, why should we care about municipal government? Because it's an accessible way to get involved. And this is something that Patricia was talking about at the beginning of her presentation. And that is, it can seem daunting or overwhelming or complicated to try to figure out how to have an influence on what the national government is doing. But it can be a lot easier to get involved at the local level. First of all, it's a lot easier because all you have to do, this is the town of Guilderland, which is a local town near where I live, and you can just go onto the website and you can see all of the different ways that you can get involved. There's a calendar, there's the an ability to report a concern. You can, think about the agendas for the meetings that are coming up. You can go to these different meetings. And so it is a very accessible way, a very easy way to get involved. And it is a way where you can still interact face to face with other kind of community members, other residents, and your local elected officials, right? So they're not going to be behind kind of a security barrier. It is not going to be as difficult to speak with them. It is not difficult to get a meeting with them as it might be to get a state official and certainly a federal official. And I should say, this is the week my students are working on their papers about local issues. And they will pick up the phone and they will call their, town supervisor, and the supervisor will take their call, right? And help them think through whatever the local issue they're talking about is. So in practice, most people can get a meeting this way. So there's lots of ways for you to get involved. You can attend a city council meeting or board meeting. You can serve on local committees. You can actually be a part of the government quite easily. You can talk to these elected officials. Certainly you can vote, and your vote can make a difference. I had a student who was telling me that in his village, the mayor was elected with 49 votes, right? So it doesn't all, that was the total vote. Total vote for the election was 49 people. So you really can make a difference. You can volunteer on a local campaign. You can go to door. You can run for office yourself, or you can organize or attend a local forum. So in all these ways, municipal governments are important, right? They're very common, and they're a very easy way for people to get involved. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the specific ways to do that.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, so my name is Paul Wolf. I serve as President Emeritus of the New York Coalition for Open Government. And the coalition is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that advocates for timely access to information and meaningful citizen participation. We are an all-volunteer organization, no paid staff, and you can learn more about our group at our website, nyopengov.org. And we also have a pretty active Facebook page where every day we're sharing information on. So I encourage you to check that out.
Paul, I'm just going to interrupt you a second. You're not sharing.
Oh,
Let's try that again.
all right. Let's see. I went to the bottom of my screen where I had it saved, and maybe that was
You're
not the
starting
way to do it.
No, you're good. You're good.
All right, let me start that over. Sorry about that. So as I said, my name is Paul Wolf, President of the New York Coalition for Open Government. There's information where you can find our website. And today I want to talk about 4 essential resources that I think would be helpful to someone who's interested in learning more about their local government and getting involved more with their local government. And those 4 items are your municipal charter or code, your comprehensive plan, and the open meetings law and freedom of information law. So that's a lot to cover in a few minutes. So we're certainly not going to go in depth, but just want to hit some key points regarding each one of these. So first is, what is a charter? So just as at the federal level or state level, those governments are governed by a constitution. And at the local level, the constitution document is the charter. And I really encourage people to take the time. If you live in a city, every city has a charter. Not every county does. About a third of counties have a charter. Towns and villages do not have charters, but they do have local laws and state laws that you can take a look at. But at least for every city and many counties, you can find the charter online. Usually it is on the municipality's website. And if you just type in the search box charter, it will usually come up. Or if you just do a Google search of Buffalo City Charter, it's a very interesting document that I think maybe even elected officials don't look at as often as they should. But by reading the charter, you learn a great deal about how your local government is structured, how things are supposed to be done. And what I find interesting was when I read the charter, for example, the Buffalo Charter, there's a lot of things that are supposed to be done that aren't. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in the Buffalo Charter is that they're supposed to have quarterly meetings with the mayor, the school board, economic development agencies, and others to talk about community issues in government. They don't do it. I thought, wow, what an awesome meeting that would be to have a quarterly meeting with all these people in the same room. Whoever wrote that in the charter had a great idea, but unfortunately it's not being followed. So you will see some things in the charter that are very interesting and things that you can maybe advocate for. Why aren't we doing this? It's actually required by the charter. So it's just something to take a look at to get some general understanding of your local government. So these counties have a charter. This list is in alphabetical order. And let me also show you a map that shows you them. So the counties that are in the lighter color or the blue are ones that have a charter. So as Patty was talking earlier, charter counties tend to be more urban. They typically have a county executive and a county legislature. So these, blue or grayish ones there have charters. So you may live in a community that has a charter. If you don't, again, there are still, local laws in place that govern how everything's to work, but it may not be in one easy to read document. So a charter can also be revised, and there's a couple different ways that it can occur. And this is a real great opportunity to get involved in your community and to push for reform. Throughout the state right now, there's a couple different charter commissions that are occurring. There's one going on right now in Erie County up in the Buffalo area. Buffalo is about to start a charter commission. I saw that Chautauqua has one coming up right now. And there are some currently going on in Olean and Jamestown. And so it's just something to keep an eye on in the local news, or if there's a commission is being formed. It's very important. Again, what they're talking about is changing the constitution for the local government in your community. So you can form a charter commission that can be done by the local body forming it. It can be done by an initiative and referendum. You can actually file a petition seeking to have a charter commission formed in your community. There's a lot of technicalities and details to do that, but I know in the city of Hudson, New York, a group of residents have gotten together and they filed a petition to put it up for a vote to form a charter commission. So just something to be aware of that you may see, and it's a great way to get involved and learn more about how your government is doing things. And there are some reform ideas that you can advocate for. Right now, like I say, in Erie County, I'm advocating for a bunch of these things that are on this list. I'm a big believer in term limits. People may agree or disagree. But one of the things that would be in your charter is whether to have term limits or not. Ranked choice voting and open primaries are becoming more popular across the country. More and more communities are adopting these voting methods. The way it came about in New York City was through a charter commission. And it's something that you can raise to be addressed in your local community as well. open government. Um, you can, one of the things that annoys me about my community is the Buffalo Common Council and the Erie County Legislature meet during the day. They don't meet in the evening. And believe it or not, you are not allowed to speak at a Buffalo Common Council or an Erie County Legislature meeting. You have to ask for permission in advance, and I've asked and been denied. There is no state law requiring that they have to do public comments. Many places do, but I'm saying, why not put it in our charter? Because maybe if they allow it now, they can certainly take it away in the future. But if it's in your charter, it's a lot harder to change that. Live streaming of meetings. I'm a big proponent of that. I think that's something that more and more should be done. It's not hard to do. It's not as expensive to do as people claim. You could put in your charter, our meetings will be live streamed. Independent redistricting commissions, independent charter revision commission. One of my complaints is charter commissions are typically selected by city council members, county legislators. There tends to be a bit of an insiders club. But why not have independent charter commission where other people select them? Ethics reform, campaign finance reform, these are all things that you could advocate for amendments to your charter. Let me move now to comprehensive plan. So you have the charter, which is a very important document. And another very important document is your comprehensive plan. Most communities have them. If you have zoning regulations, you're actually required by New York state law to have a comprehensive plan. Most places have zoning regulations, but there are some rural communities that may not. And this is, again, something that you should be able to find online on your local government's website or just a general Google search. And it's another very interesting document to read because it just lays out, what your government officials believe kind of your community priorities are. And why is the plan important? Because it gets into details about land use and types of development, infrastructure projects. It's used to help secure funding. If you have something that's in your plan, it's a lot easier to be able to get funding for it because you have some of the details already worked out and some plans in place. And it affects you in a lot of ways. Your comprehensive plan lays out, where things can go. It lays out how affordable housing is addressed. It addresses public transit, parks, green spaces. All that is in the comprehensive plan. And a lot of communities will update these kind of every 10 years, but there are some, again, it's maybe 20 years since your plan was updated. So one way to get involved in your community is to say, you know what, we need a new plan. The plan we have in place now is 20 years old, 10 years old. Things are changing pretty rapidly nowadays. And your community may be very different than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So take a look at your comprehensive plan to see what's in there, what it requires. And there may be things in there that just don't make sense anymore, or things are missing that should be included in there. And as part of the comprehensive plan, planning boards and zoning boards come into play as well. So your city council or town board is very important, but probably equally important, and sometimes even more, are your planning boards and zoning boards. Because these sticky questions and debates about, what we're doing about community development are often driven by or decided by planning boards and zoning boards. So these boards will implement the comprehensive plan. The zoning board is where people go to say, we want a variance from the plan, which sometimes can be very controversial. We want to put a commercial development in an area that's not zoned commercial. Well, that may or may not be a good idea, but it's an opportunity for you to play a part in that because the zoning board or planning board needs to address that. So certainly being aware of what they're doing and how they're addressing your comprehensive plan can be very important to your community. And again, it's a great opportunity to get involved in advocating in your community. Now let's talk about some open government laws. So if you want to start attending meetings, or if you are attending meetings, there is a state open meetings law, and that applies to your city council, your town board, your village board, your county legislature, school board. It also applies to planning boards and zoning boards. And there's some important things that people may not be aware of, and that is that all of them are required to post their meeting agendas and documents online at least 24 hours before a meeting occurs. 24 hours, in my opinion, is woefully inadequate. There's states that require 72 hours. And believe it or not, until 2021, it was the Coalition for Open Government got the 24 hours put in there. It just said documents had to be posted online without a time requirement. And there were lawsuits because, town boards were putting it up an hour before the meeting. And they said, hey, that's what, there's no requirement. We put it up. So we got the state legislature to at least put in 24 hours. I'd love to expand that in the future to 48 or 72. But I see a lot of places that aren't doing this. I look at a lot of municipal websites, planning boards, zoning boards. A lot of times they'll just have a one-page agenda of topics, and there's no documents. And it's kind of hard when you go to a meeting and, the board members have a stack of documents in front of them, and they're having discussions or debates about specific language in a resolution or a contract. Well, you should see that as well. Fortunately, in my town of Amherst, sometimes they will literally scan and post 1,000 pages for their meeting documents. It's not hard to do. So that's just something to be aware of. If they're not doing it, call them out on it. Ask the town supervisor, the city council, why aren't the meeting documents posted online for us to see? Meeting minutes or a recording must be posted online within 14 days of a meeting. I don't like the oral recording. Again, there was no requirement to post meeting minutes until we pushed for it. And they inserted in there oral recording. To me, why can't you do both? I personally like to read meeting minutes as opposed to scrolling through a 2-hour meeting to find what I'm looking for. But even if they post recordings but not meeting minutes, you can certainly ask for them. They're required to have them even if they're not posted. But it's important to learn what's happening at a meeting if you miss it by being able to go find the minutes or the recording. As I said earlier, there's no requirement under the open meetings law for you to be able to speak, which I find to be crazy. Most places will allow you to speak, but they can also put rules in place. So you should find out what the rules are. Your city council or town board will typically have some sort of rules online or as part of their rules of procedure. How long do you get to speak? Do you have to sign up beforehand? Some places will only allow you to speak to agenda items. Other places you can bring up any concern that you have, whether it's on the agenda or not. So, take the time to find out, what the rules are you allowed to speak, and how that process works. Other issues on the open meetings law, the board can meet behind closed doors in executive session. But there are rules for that. There's supposed to be limited circumstances. I see a lot of mistakes with this. They have to make a motion during the meeting, which has to be seconded and approved. And they have to state what the reason is for them going behind closed doors. And they should be specific about it. What I see a lot of mistakes are motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel. That is not sufficient under the law. It's interestingly is the word personnel is not even mentioned in the open meetings law. Now they can go behind closed doors to discuss disciplining an employee, hiring an employee, maybe evaluating an employee, but they should say that. The executive session to discuss disciplining an employee. They don't have to state the name. They don't have to state the position. But they don't like to say that, it's much nicer to say personnel because then you have no idea. Well, you should have an idea of what they're talking about behind closed doors. Another common mistake is go into executive session to discuss litigation. They really need to be more specific than that. The litigation should be a lawsuit. Well, state the name of the lawsuit. Smith versus the town of Amherst, or we're going behind closed doors to discuss that. If they're just getting an update of what's going on with the lawsuit, there's no reason for that to occur behind closed doors. I suspect this is what frequently happens. They can do an update in a public session. The attorney can tell the town board, this is the next court date. This is what occurred in court. That should happen in public. You're only supposed to go behind closed doors to discuss legal strategy. And quite honestly, that should be left to the attorneys, and the board members really shouldn't be that involved in legal strategy. So I think it's often abused. There are some places that literally every meeting has an executive session, which I think is excessive. I've seen some boards, because they clock what time the executive session starts and what time it ends, they meet more in private than they do in public, which is just ridiculous to me. So it is something, again, to keep an eye on and that you can call them out on. I don't think you did your executive session properly. We've done reports on this that you can find on our website. Now let's also talk about the Freedom of Information Law. You have a right to request information. All records are presumed to be available to the public. So if they have it, you're entitled to it. There are always some exceptions or exemptions. And those generally are, if there's a legal investigation going on, they can withhold documents. They can withhold some things for privacy reasons, but that doesn't mean the whole document. They can black out in certain instances, names, addresses. So there are some exemptions, but generally speaking, you have a right to know what your government officials are doing as far as requesting documents. And the best place to start is usually the town clerk or the city clerk. They're typically the person who's in charge of processing FOIL requests. If you're denied your request or if they withhold some of the documents, you do have a right to appeal. It's real simple. It's nothing scary. It's done by simply sending a letter, typically to the town attorney or the city attorney, saying, I was denied and I don't think I should have been. And sometimes you win that appeal. So there's a process there that you can learn about. Well, what type of things can you get through a FOIL request? And the law is pretty broad as far as what a record is defined as. I mean, it's reports, memos, files, books, manuals, drawings, photographs, recordings, police camera recordings, body cam recordings. All these things now, technology-wise, can be requested and you can obtain them. So just be aware, though, if you put in a request, be brief, be to the point. I see some people, send in 5 pages of requests, and that's not going to probably go well. Keep in mind that the clerk's offices are busy places, so try to be as specific as possible. Most of them will work with you, but sometimes, some places are resistant, but there is a process to do this. So that takes us to now. You have a better understanding of your local government by having reviewed your charter, your comprehensive plan. You have some, basic understanding of your rights under the Open Meetings Law and the Freedom of Information Law. So now how can you get involved and, pick your issue? We all have, whatever issue is important to us. You can gather information about that either through those documents that we mentioned or through FOIL requests. All government meetings are open to the public. You can certainly attend. reach out to your local officials. Again, the great thing about the local level is, you may see them at the supermarket or in your community. Usually their email addresses are on their website. You can reach out to them. Certainly organize support. Um, get the media involved. Unfortunately, newspapers are declining, but if you are fortunate enough to have a local reporter, they're always looking for stuff to cover. So if you have an issue that's important to you, they might write about it. And that always helps. Use your open government laws. And finally, run for public office. Well, I don't care what your party is, Democrat, Republican, blank. We need more good people to run for office. Um, about 50% of the time, at least, I think an incumbent is running without an opponent. So there's certainly plenty of opportunities to step into the arena. It's not an easy thing to do. I did it myself once in 2011. I ran for town clerk. I did not win, but I learned a lot from it. It was a great experience. I actually enjoyed it. So I encourage you to do it as well. So I think that concludes my portion, and I'm going to turn it back over to Patricia. So let me stop sharing my screen here.
Still sharing, Paul.
Yeah, now I lost where I was. I exited out, so now what do I do?
You should have like a little bar or something. Hold on, let me see if I can force you off.
Oh, here I am. Okay.
So folks, we're going to do question and answer, and there's only been a few questions that have gone into the chat. We're going to start with those, but then we can do open mic kind of situation. Paul, did you find it? Stop sharing.
Oh, I thought I did. So if I go to share, is that where I go, or is there a different spot I go?
Yeah, I think you could go to share and it will. Hold on.
Yeah, because I click share, but then it takes me back.
Hold on. I'm sharing and then I'll stop sharing and hopefully
All right.
that'll do it. That'll do it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I hope you guys so far have really found this pretty engaging. We want it to be engaging. We want you guys to ask questions and have answers. But I got one very large question and that I'm going to try and read through. I thought I was going to break it into parts, but then I recognize it's all around the same topic. So from Ann Erling, somebody from our Albany League, and I'll send this out to both Professor Strach and Paul Wolf as maybe to answer. Can you recommend best practices to encourage faster action on climate? Now comes the rest of it. What portions of the challenge are actually overseen by counties versus at the municipal level? Who should we be interacting with? A legislative body, the departments? To what extent might revising the charter be important? Sounds to me like that would be in there. How, and she goes on, how important is the comprehensive plan to this process? And are there easy ways to find out possible funding streams and available sources to help and share with municipalities? And what should we be monitoring? And what's the best way to do that? Given home rule, is there a way to use state legislation to push municipalities to take climate-friendly steps? So let's start with the first part. Can you recommend best practice to encourage faster action? What portions of the challenge are overseen by counties versus the municipal level? So this is all about climate change. I'm not sure which one of you wants to take that on, but it's a big fat question.
Yeah, I haven't been very involved in the climate change issue myself. I know that I've seen my local county talk about it. I've seen my city council talk about it. So I think it's something that each level of government is addressing in some fashion or another. I think the comprehensive plan is definitely an important place for that stuff to be. So I would take a look at your comprehensive plan and see what it says about climate change. And that could be a great opportunity to maybe seek to add more to it. Same thing with your charter. If it's not in there, perhaps it needs to be in there. I know the state legislature is really involved in this issue. So you have all different levels to kind of, push. But I don't have anything more specific than that. I don't know if either of the Patties do.
So Professor Strach, do you see climate change as any different than any other issue in terms of what level of government to involve?
I think people think very commonly about climate change at the federal level or maybe the state level, but there's a lot of things that local governments do, even like green concrete or something like that, even the kinds of building materials that the local government is using or that it's going to require other kinds of businesses to use. So there is a big role for local governments. And I was listening to a podcast where there was like a local officials from Pennsylvania was talking about this very issue in terms of, we tend to think of these big laws that happen at the federal level in terms of climate, but we don't think about all the kinds of decisions that get added up. And when you think about every municipality or every local government making these decisions, you could have a very large impact. And so I do think that there is a role for activism on behalf of the climate at the local level. And I don't know that there's like an easy, I mean, one of the reasons why people don't take a strategy of every local government is that you then have, 36,000 municipalities to work towards. But I do think that one of the things that we've seen is that there's a diffusion practice, right? So if you can see a local government that's done this successfully, or you can get your local government to take action that you think is successful, then you can roll that out as a model for other local governments to follow. So I think thinking about in terms of what are the specific practices that local governments are already doing around this, and then how do we get a particular local government, and then how do we get other local governments to kind of build on, there is this diffusion effect where it kind of rolls out.
It's good. All right, next question. Can we address the nuances between municipalities and districts' authorities, like parks or waterfronts with individual bonding authorities? So we didn't really touch on really authorities. So do one of you want to take a little bit about that? Is there the nuances that go on there? Speak to those nuances.
Yeah, authorities are a whole nother world. And they are required to have public meetings as well and post their meeting documents online. But they are their own separate entity with their own separate board. So you have to really kind of follow, if there's a specific project that you're interested in, it may not necessarily, go to the city council. It may go to an industrial development agency. And it's hard to keep track of that. The whole purpose of authorities, I think, in a lot of ways, is to make it hard to hold people accountable because they are their own separate entities.
And do
I
they
just want to
tend
say that
yeah.
when I showed that graph and that the black bars at the bottom were very stay similar over time. So the traditional local governments, the counties, the cities, the towns, the villages, they don't really change. We don't get more of them. The growth over time, where you do see expansion and contraction, are in these special purpose governments. So things like a district, for example, like a water district or a fire district. Part of that is meeting a need, right? So you have a need, a town isn't providing fire services, so you need a fire district to come and provide those services. That's the legitimate way that it happens. But there's also a way to get around. There's all kinds of rules in New York State about what municipalities can and cannot do, what kind of financing mechanisms they are and are not allowed to have, how much, they can raise the tax cap, the local government tax cap, right? So all of those things they have to follow. And there's all these end runs around them by using things like special districts or special purpose governments. So sometimes it really is a legitimate need. So maybe, the MTA really is the best way to serve a transportation for a region. But sometimes it's a way, they have financing mechanisms that the local governments don't have. And so I think, understanding why we have these alternative governments, and also how they're deployed to address certain things that the local government might not be able to do by itself in a way that the state intended and the state did not intend when they were created.
Thank you. What resources would you recommend for people just starting to serve in local government at the village or town level?
I think Paul's probably got a list of these a mile long, but the Department of State has a nice kind of handbook for, municipal governments, and it just runs through very with enough detail so you get a sense. You can look at what are the rules for town governments, for city governments, for villages, and it goes back into the history, and then it provides some of the details about the law. So that would be the place that I would start.
Yeah, I agree. A couple years ago, I found the handbook and it was really helpful and informative. And again, if you just Google, I think New York State Local Government Handbook, I think they have one there's one that covers all local governments, and they even have some separate ones that may be just for towns or cities. Um, and there's some great associations out there, whether it's the New York State Conference of Mayors or New York State Association of Counties. Get involved with those groups. They put on a lot of seminars and trainings and have a lot of resources.
So there was a question that someone else answered for you, Paul, which is there a turnaround time required for government to produce docs from a FOIA request? And T. Jackson gave the answer. The New York statute calls for 5 business days to deny or grant the request, and a non-answer is considered a denial that must be appealed within 30 days. You're in lockstep with that?
Right. They have 5 business days to acknowledge your request, and they could respond. Typically they don't, and typically they have another 20 days to give you the information. But they will frequently ask for extensions. But after 30 days, you can file an appeal. Um, I've seen some places right off the bat, they're saying, we're going to get back to you within 6 months, which is pretty crazy. So hopefully at your town or local level, it's not that bad. Those are usually like state agencies, but typically, yeah, 20 to 30 days, you should receive your information, but it's not uncommon for them to ask for more time.
Right. How much is local government affected by federal government, especially things like funding for schools, upholding things like additional funding for Title I schools, energy in a rural area, or policies like Title IX or Title VII?
Federal government has a huge effect on local governments, huge, massive. And when we think about all the rules that the federal government is passing, all the laws that they're creating, that all has to get implemented by somebody. And oftentimes that's implemented by the states, and the states pass that money through to local governments. And so there is, the federal government is taking a lot of dollars, a lot of federal tax dollars that then get redistributed back to the states, that get passed through to local governments. So local governments, I think it's a quarter to a third of their funding comes from the federal government, right? The budgets of states and the budgets of local governments. So just in terms of dollars, so much of funding is coming from the federal government. So it has a huge effect in the dollars and in the kinds of policies that it's pushing down to states, and then states push down to local governments.
Yep, big impact. Crystal Harris says, awesome presentation. I'm currently petitioning for Common Council in my city. Any tips on the best way to collect signatures to get on the ballot?
Well, I have gotten signatures for years. Back when I was doing it, the petition time was summertime, and then they changed the law that now you're getting petitions at this time of year. So it's colder,
February.
but the
Yep.
advantage is hopefully more people are home. I always preferred going door to door. Some people prefer, going out to community events, but again, this time of year, it's not like it was when you did it in the summer. I think the key thing is getting a list from the Board of Elections as to who registered voters are. I think door to door works best.
Yep. I myself have done petitioning, and the other thing is to stand in I found this one very interesting just in terms of engaging the community. Stand inside the inside of your supermarket, right in where you first come in, and start talking to people and approach them. That's also, or go to the library and do it at the
And
library where people are really gathering.
I know other candidates have also made sure they went to senior citizen centers because I saw the responses. Yeah, it's hard to get people to open the door. Senior citizen centers are definitely big outside of bingos when people are going. So you kind of got to look at church, where people are coming in and out, that you may be able to get them to sign.
Yep. So someone was asking, can we provide other examples, more examples of change that first occurs at the local level and then influences the state or the national level? And someone else responded, but let's see if we get more with that, with the fact of, hold on, where was that other response? Hold on. I thought I had it. I guess I don't. So do you guys have other situations? I know I have a couple, but I'll let you guys answer first. Have you seen a lot of change coming from the bottom up and the advantages of that? Up to the state level, for instance. Or no?
My efforts have been focused more at the state level because I'm lobbying for changes with the open meetings law and the freedom of information law, and that is really at the state level. Um, but I think it's certainly helpful to get local officials on board with that as well. So I would have Patricia give her examples.
Well, I know that, for instance, we had clean air laws that are, started at in this case, started at the municipal level and then went to the county level. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any right off the, okay, I thought I had a couple examples to share, but I don't with right off the top of my head. So I apologize to you guys.
I think
Any
a lot
advice?
of the
Go
education
ahead.
reforms come from schools and school districts that are trying new things that state governments take, and then the federal government, because, education is such an issue that is dominated by local and then state governments. The federal government will pop in and take those ideas. Big education reforms in the 90s with Bill Clinton happened that way, right? Coming up from the local level. So I think there are these examples. I think probably more common than trickling up to the federal government is trickling across to other local governments. And so when you think about what the change happens at local governments, it's less, okay, well, now the federal government's going to take these ideas and run with them, and more like local governments are going to then do the same kinds of things that they see other local governments doing.
Yeah,
And
go
that's
ahead,
a
Bill.
good point as well. I find what works best is oftentimes government officials are afraid to be the first to do something. And if you can say to them, hey, look, they did this in Syracuse, they did this in Albany, why can't we do it here? Same thing when I got some of our laws passed at the state level. These other states are doing it. You guys should be able to do it too. So if you can find successful examples elsewhere, it always helps to make people, less afraid or less reluctant to do it.
Yeah, like
Agree.
broadband expansion, for example, is something that local governments do that would then, trickle out to other local governments.
Yep, agree. I've seen it where it spreads. Any advice on how to get local residents involved in local government? Marcellus, the town where I live, had a public open house about the town's updated comprehensive plan, and my husband and I were the only two people to attend.
Yeah, the hard part is, comprehensive plans are certainly not the most exciting thing, but they're critical. And typically what happens is there's got to be something of, of controversy, unfortunately, or interest. I know in my town of Amherst, I would go to the town board meetings and there would typically be a handful of people there. But then when they did a 11% tax increase, all of a sudden there were 200 people there. Or if there's a development project that people don't like, so you kind of got to jump on the bandwagon of when you get people's attention. And out of that 11% property tax increase, a group formed called Concerned Citizens for Amherst. And now there's, 40, 50 people regularly meeting to address, what to do about the town. And it filters out to other issues. So unfortunately, I think you see that you got to have something controversial happen that gets people's interest.
I think, as Paul says, when you say we're going to talk about the comprehensive plan, I think most people go to sleep. But when when it's very concrete, and you're to say, look, we're thinking about putting whatever kinds of business on the corner by your house, then you're going to get, I mean, there's the signs for like, don't put up a cell phone tower in my neighborhood, then you get a lot of people turning out, right? And so I think if it's grounded in something, right? So the comprehensive plan isn't as interesting as saying, look, here's this concrete proposal. It is part of the comprehensive plan. So if you are for or opposed to this, usually people are opposed, that's what gets them to show up, then we should think about how we want the comprehensive plan to look. They think if it's not concrete, look, everyone's busy. They're, working and coming home and trying to juggle all kinds of things. And so they have to really see, oftentimes, concretely what the effect would be of their participation before they really feel motivated to show up.
And from my perspective too, sometimes there's a lot going on and it's just writing under the covers. And, and that's where I see social media, for instance, helping sometimes to, put out information, whether it's the Nextdoor app or whether it's Facebook or whatever, that people will see, because your municipality may not have a very good communication notification system, and you might have just tuned into it because you happen to see something, that meeting. But if you see something, share it with others. It could be helpful, and explain to them why it's important. Let's see here.
If I just can jump on that point to what, Paul was saying, that, sometimes things happen behind closed doors. If I'm going to discuss something controversial and I don't want people to show up, then I'm going to frame it in the most uninteresting language that I can. So I think part of it is like thinking about how this might have an impact and then communicating that, not just public officials communicating that, but, citizen to citizen, resident to resident, saying, hey, do you know they're talking about this? This is really important.
Absolutely. Let me see. I'm going to just open it up. If anyone at this point has questions, we have like just a few minutes left, about 5 minutes, and then I'll do the wrap up. But let me say before that, yes, this recording will be available, and yes, you can get slides, and we'll be sending out an email afterwards. But if anyone has questions at this point that you think I didn't cover, or comments to make, just raise your hand or unmute yourself, and we'll take them. We'll take questions that way. I know one thing that was in one of the questions was something about municipal home rule, which some people have heard but don't really understand. Do either one of you want to tackle municipal home rule a little bit?
Go ahead.
Oh, that
I'll just
sounds good
say that,
too.
it's a legal concept that gives a municipality the right to do certain things. There's, state law trumps local laws, but municipalities have under home rule, have the right to manage their own affairs, are given leeway in, certain areas to pass laws and resolutions to conduct their own business. But they have to make sure that they're also not violating state laws. So home rule is just the right for them to manage their own affairs. There are limitations with that. And you'll see that when you look at the city charter, actually, as far as those types of things.
Okay. Any other questions that people have? Otherwise, I can run through my wrap up. Did everyone get the quiz? Did you try the quiz?
Looks like Anne
Oh,
Erling.
Anne, yep. Unmute yourself, Anne. You should be able to.
Oh, yeah. So Susan Siegel in the chat had identified a variety of different things to do, and somebody else also had recommended things, but I'm seeing Susan's. Are the things that she recommended, like zoning or, you know, the things that she recommended, would they need to be tackled at the legislative level, or could they be accomplished through an executive,
Well,
the
let me
executive
recap what
branch?
Susan
So a
said.
department decision.
Yeah, let me recap what Susan says, and Susan, you can jump on in too.
And
To
you mean the
implement
one
climate
to-
at the local level, adopt local laws impacting solar farms and battery storage, install solar panels onto municipal properties, purchase hybrid vehicles, offer tax incentives to property owners for solar installation. Susan, do you want to speak more, or?
And then also zoning, especially zoning is what counts. She said.
Sure.
Not the
the,
comprehensive plan, which is just a vision. So that is the difference between the comprehensive plan lays out what is the plan, but then you end up enacting that into zoning laws.
Regarding the solar, I'm on the town board in the town of Yorktown. So we have a solar law that says where you can put solar panels on a residence or a business, but also you can have large scale solar farms. And we're in the process of amending the law. So that's strictly local. There's no state involvement in that. We also have a battery storage facility law, which again, we've had those since 2020, and we're in the process of amending them now. Some of it's very controversial, but that's all local. Certainly, putting solar panels, whether they're ground mounted or over municipal parking lots, strictly local. We've had a lot of pressure to purchase hybrid vehicles for our town fleet. Again, all of those issues that I mentioned are absolutely 100% local.
Excellent.
The only issue came up with battery storage, and that's something we recently learned about. If we were planning to ban tier 2 large scale commercial battery storage facilities, and we learned there's something called a public utility waiver, which is something that would lower the standards for that. But that's a legal technicality that we're going to be working out. And
Thank you,
also
Susan.
in terms of the zoning, rezoning, yeah, the comprehensive plan is a document, it's a vision. But anyone can come in and say, I want to rezone my property. You have it for single family homes, and I want to rezone it for multifamily homes, and this is my reasons. So it's the zoning that counts, not the comprehensive plan, because you can read whatever you want into a comprehensive plan.
Good point.
Very good point. Okay.
So related to that, though, I guess I was wondering, those things that she's recommending, would those be things that you would be working through the Common Council or the legislative body to do, or are they things that directly the executive branch can make decisions?
Oh, no, they're strictly be legislative. Any local laws would be legislative. Purchasing would have to be done by, whether it's a town board or a city council. They would make the determination, I think. Well, I shouldn't say that because I only really know town law, but I imagine the city council would have to approve expenditures. So that would determine, because sometimes the hybrid vehicles are more expensive than gasoline powered vehicles.
Okay. Anything else before I go into the wrap up? All right, I really want to thank my partners here. They have been outstanding in all the work that they put into this, Professor Strach and Paul Wolf, and I really do. And I thank you all for, taking a piece of your evening and coming and attending. I know an hour and a half is a long session, but we wanted really the time for question and answer. We wanted it to be much more interactive. So there will be an email that will go out. It will include a link to the recording. It'll take us a day or so to get that out. And we ask that you also take the survey. Again, do you want to see more of these type sessions? And if so, on what topics? And at the same time, do check out the quiz. We'll add it again. It'll force you to go look at your local municipality's website a little bit. It's an open book quiz to see if you can answer some of the questions. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Any last words from my partners around the table or any first?
Just that I look forward to seeing everyone at the local town board meetings.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. I appreciate everyone's time, and you have a good day. And check out your local, if you haven't already, check out your local league, who actually does a lot of this work and gets involved in with partnerships. So it's a good organization. I strongly recommend it. Thank you so much. Have a good night.